So today I'm going to be talking about leveraging AMP for e-commerce, specifically Eventbrite's journey to optimize our mobile pages. This is very much a learning experiment for us to start off with, and we've actually been able to implement a lot of what we've learned through changing our page to AMP into our non-AMP page as well. So, I'm Beck Cronin-Dixon, same shirt, different hair. I'm a software engineer at Eventbrite, specializing in search engine optimization, and I was the lead developer for our AMP project. Feel free to come up during the conference to chat. I always love a chat, but I'm also available by email, Twitter, and on the AMP Slack channel, as I hope most of you are. So first, I'm going to describe a bit about what Eventbrite does. We're a self-service platform for organizers to create, manage, and promote their events. We have a whole selection of tools that allows them to create their best event yet. And most specifically for this talk, we're the marketplace for live events. So our job is to place organizers' events where their attendees can see them, whether that's through internal search or through Google or any other search engine. So this leads me to the page we actually implemented as AMP. This is our listings page. It's the most important page for our organizer, therefore it's the most important page for us. This page lists all the details needed for an attendee to make the decision about whether they're going to purchase a ticket or not. They can also, most importantly, purchase a ticket through this page. The reason we chose this page rather than say something easier like a landing page was this page has very high traffic. As I said before, it's most important to our organizer, and we've also been we're always trying to optimize our pages and make them faster. Currently, this page loads in between 2 to 3 seconds, but we're always trying to optimize it. And in our AMP version, it loads at around 1 second and quicker with the Google cache. So we've actually learned a lot from this. So this is our AMP listing page. And it doesn't seem like my video is working, but anyway. As you can see, the designs are very similar. We decided to do this because our rollout plan was to incrementally roll out, so 10, 20, 30%. We're at 50% at the moment. And we wanted to keep we didn't want to confuse attendees with different designs, because oftentimes people will find the page through Google, but they'll link to it and then they'll come back to buy tickets on desktop. So we didn't want them. We wanted them to be able to find that ticket, the ticket button very easily. So before we were allowed to undertake this endeavor, we had to meet some requirements. Product laid this out for us. First of all, we had to make sure that we met Eventbrite's unique brand expectations. When you land on any of our pages, we take pride in you knowing that you're on an Eventbrite page. We have similar styles across pages. We're very strict with design for that, and also we have a beautiful style guide that sort of makes sure that we have those restrictions in place. Next off, it had to improve user experience. So not only meet the same expectations for user experience as the non-AMP page, but we had to prove that we could make this a better experience overall for the attendee, and not just through speed as well. So we wanted to take so this was an experiment for us, and we wanted to take also some learnings from this page and move it to our non-AMP page as well. Another requirement we had to meet was the ticketing process should be consistent. So we have a whole team that works around like purchase flow and the ticketing page, and we had to make sure that first of all, that attendees could still purchase tickets, whether it's a big on sale or not, that's very important, but also that they saw the same ticketing process in the non-AMP page and the AMP page. There had to be no confusion there. We also had to make sure that some of our real-time data was coming down. So that includes, like wait list. Also, we say a ticket is unavailable if somebody's in the checkout at the moment. But if they leave, then that ticket becomes available straight away. When you have thousands of people trying to buy tickets for very, limited amount of tickets, you've got to make sure you have that real-time data coming down constantly. Another requirement we had to meet was maintainability. We had to make sure that if we built this page, that we could be able to scale. If we decide to use AMP for other pages, we wanted to be able to use those components, the global components, so the footer, the header, But also, we wanted to make sure that we could use the same designs that we have throughout our site. So were we able to, if we found something worked for the AMP page, could we port that over to the non-AMP page pretty easily? We also, and most importantly, we had to make sure it was effective. This kind of, goes back to all the points, but we had to make sure that that we were doing this for a reason, that the user got something out of it, that we could, not just increase speed. That's very important. It's very much a big reason why we looked at this. But we also had to make sure that users were converting. We had more click-through rates. So first I'm going to talk about the challenges that we faced, how we overcame them, and some of the lessons that we learnt through this. So first up was maintainability. We, as I said before, we had to make sure that this would scale. So how did we accomplish that? We actually, because this is an experiment, we didn't want to just go and use, like, we're currently using Backbone and Handlebars, but we're porting over to React. So we didn't want to be in that, we didn't want to make it in Backbone and Handlebars just to have to port it over. So we actually, what we're using as well is Mako templates, which is Python's dynamic templating system. It allows us to use a lot of conditionals. So we're using that, and because that's pure HTML as well in there, it'll be easier to port that over to React when the listings page decides to go that way. And it also means that some of those smaller HTML templates we can just push over to to the non-AMP page because they are using Mako and Backbone for templating. So that's how we do our templating system, and it allows us to use a lot of conditionals in there and personalize the page. What we're doing to keep our design in line is we're using Sass with the grunt task. The reason why we're already using Sass, so that was great. But what we added to the grunt task was we actually we render the Sass, and then we minimize it, but what we also do is we strip out any blacklisted tags from AMP that might be ported over from our style guide. So we're not using everything in our style guide. The first thing I did when we decided to do AMP pages was I was like, all right, well, let me see what happens when I load our whole style guide inline. Yeah, we went way over. That was never a possibility, and we didn't want it to be. That's not what AMP's about, right? This is an opportunity to show that you can limit your CSS. You can, you can limit, you can optimize your HTML, and you don't have to use JavaScript for everything. So what we did was we're using a lot of imports, which I'll show in a minute, so we could keep in line with our design. But we also had some blacklisted, some blacklisted code in there, so the important tag came up quite a few times, which, we shouldn't have that anyway, but it was in there. We also had charset UTF-8 at the top of a lot of our files. These sort of code is not it won't break the page if we strip that out, so I actually have, I'm stripping that out of any import files that we're doing for CSS, and then we just print it out to the page. So next I want to talk a bit about dynamic templating. We're using a lot of the Mako template is great for us because we have conditionals, and you can use this, if you're, rendering your JavaScript server side, you can use this as well, React or Backbone or Angular. But for us, we have a lot of different event statuses, or ticket statuses. So whether it's a live or end event, or whether our tickets are sold out, they need to show, that we show sort of a different template or a different design. So the example here of what you're seeing is the live event versus the ended event, and you can tell they're very different templates. On the ended event, we focus more on the related events, so people can quickly go into our site that way. If you clicked on the view details, you would actually get the exact same information you see and the same template loaded in there through an AMP accordion. So we're using just conditionals like this. Event container is ended, but that makes it really easy for us. And also we use a lot of these smaller files. So I was saying before that for scalability we needed to be able to share those components. So we're using AMP header, AMP footer. Now this is pretty logical, but I just wanted to there's this myth out there. That's just for like AMP is just for pages that just sort of got to kind of have a title and the content printed out, and it's always the same. Doesn't have to be. You can build it for these these pages that are continually changing. Another thing that we need is personalization. So for any time we're pointing an AMP page, pointing to an AMP page on our site, we can do personalization. So that's like if the user is logged in or they're logged out, we can change it through also through those conditionals. So obviously it doesn't work when it's coming from the Google cache. It's not too much of a priority for us, but sometimes we just like to have those little tweaks for times that when we are pointing to, we are using the AMP page through our site. So next up, I want to debunk a little myth. I want to debunk a myth about the CSS limit, that it limits you in design-wise. I feel like we created a beautiful page. We had recently gone through a redesign for our non-AMP version, and as you saw, that our AMP version is pretty similar to our non-AMP version, with a few small little tweaks. So when we started to build this, we were very worried about the CSS limit. We'd heard a lot of stories about people saying we can't create a nice page, we can't design for AMP. If you're really truly passionate about optimizing pages but keeping user experience and design, then AMP can do that as well. So one thing that allows us to do that is using Sass, so using a CSS preprocessor, and it also helps for when you want to go quickly. We're able to use this complex logic within our Sass. So the first one is actually us creating spacing classes. So we have a grid unit that increments by 5 pixels, and so that was I just had to write 5 lines of code there instead of having 20. And even I'm not using a lot of those, but I will be in other AMP pages. But even doing some things like that, we still didn't go over the CSS limit, nowhere close to it. So yeah, Sass is great to use for if you're running for using complex logic within your CSS. It's also great if you want to, like us, we want to include styles from our existing style guide. Our designers work really hard to create a cohesive brand image. And a lot of the ways we do that is we limit developers putting in their own hex codes or their own grid units, those sort of things. So what we're able to do is we store them as variables, and I was able to port all of our variables, which is quite a lot, into our AMP page from our existing style guide, and none of that gets rendered to the page. That's just used when rendering from Sass to CSS. And I was also able to use import statements to import existing styles. So an example of that is the loading spinner for what we're using for our AMP lightboxes. I didn't really want to play with that animation again. I just wanted the exact same thing. So instead of having to duplicate that, I could just import it. Same with our settings. So next I'm going to move on to ticketing. Part of our ticketing process is that, I did have a video here, but what it is you click on that green ticket, and we're actually doing a new page load. So this is one place where we do, we had to make a bit of a leeway or compromise, as you will. So we need JavaScript. This is a place where we absolutely need JavaScript on the page. So this is the user experience here. You click on the tickets button, and we actually load a new page, which is our tickets widget. And as you can see up the top, you have a back to listings button. That'll take you back to the AMP page. So we could, the reason why we absolutely need JavaScript on this page is because of because we have to deal with waitlisting, we have to deal with real-time data. There's no way around that, and I don't know if AMP, this is a very niche case for us, and I don't know if AMP wants, AMP shouldn't be for every single use case either. They're trying to put limits, and they're not trying to force every page on the web to be an AMP page. Sometimes you just need to do something like this or use an iframe. We went with this approach rather than an iframe because we don't know how long those tickets are going to be. For different place. So this only has 4 tickets. Some places have like 100 tickets. You know, we've seen forms where it's 100 tickets long and a lot of descriptions. So we didn't want to stick that on the page. So we decided with the new page load, we also didn't want to have to depend on like a component, you know, like an AMP light box that's loading an AMP iframe and then loading our ticket widget. So we were quite lucky that we had a team that actually had made this endpoint for us beforehand, so our organisers could show their own tickets on their website, and you would never have to leave there. So the great thing about this too is we have that back to listings button, which still connects the page to the tickets widget to the page, so the user still feels like they're in a modal, they're in that same flow. And as we'll see later on too, that we for other places we need iframes or to show any of that sort of content, we include that back to listings button there, so it's a cohesive flow. So another problem that we had was user-generated content. So on our, for our listings page, the organizer is in charge of that. That's how we want it. We want them to show any information that they want, you know, in a certain limited range. So we were quite lucky that we already strip out on create the, we already strip out CSS, any CSS or any script tags, so we didn't really have to worry about that. What we did have to worry about was images. And I know what you're saying, why couldn't you just done amp dash, you know, put an amp dash in front of the image tag? Well, the problem was the aspect ratio. So we never know how we don't tell our organisers how to position images within their descriptions. So they could put them next to each other, they could have them as full page, anything like that. So there was a couple of things we could have done with this. What we thought about is we could have we could have just showed the non-AMP version for any page that had an image in it, but I didn't want to exclude anybody from this experience. So what we ended up doing was if the organizer didn't have an image, we'd just print it out to the page as normal. But if they did, we'd create an abstract. So we'd strip out the image tag, this is on the server side, strip out the image tag, we'd do a character count limit of 500, and then we'd print out the page, as you can see up there, and add a read more button. When you click the read more button, it loads an AMP lightbox with an iframe inside that prints out the whole image. And then, as you can see from before, we have that back to listings button, so it all looks cohesive. This is a short-term solution for us. A long-term solution is on the create side, we take that aspect ratio and save it as data attributes. Now, what we could do on the server side is, like make a request to S3 to see that how that image size is. We didn't want to do that either. We want this page quick. But what we've also found out, and what we're thinking about putting on our non-AMP page, is that people actually like that abstract. Sometimes our description, an organizer's description, takes up, they have to scroll 50 times just to get to the venue information or anything, or to see the map for the venue. So we're actually thinking about putting this on the non-AMP page as well, because it is a nice experience, and users are used to clicking the read more and it's opening a modal. Yep, so that was meant to slow. Anyway, another problem we had was lightboxes and iframes. So like the description that you saw, we were actually using in quite a few places this, like opening a lightbox that then loads an iframe for any of our content that we just can't get around, using just specifically AMP for. So this was working well. I have an Android device and I was using Chrome tools, and for our first iteration I was like, all right, this works well. And then we had a testing party, test early, test often. And we realized that the AMP lightbox didn't scroll on iOS. And that wasn't a bug, that was actually a decision by the AMP team, because the AMP lightbox was made mainly for images and short content. But I had promised I had promised product that I could do, that this was a great design. And then I came back to him and said, hey, can we just load the iframe on page? No, we like this idea of the of a fake modal coming up. All right. So I went and I had a look. What could I do? And I found WebKit Overflow Scrolling Touch that I could put on the iframe. So I gave up the scrolling on the lightbox. That was a decision. But what about the iframe? I came up with this, and it worked quite well. Except, we had another testing party, And I realized that when you clicked back into, like you clicked back to listings and then you clicked back into the lightbox, nothing rendered. So I was back to square one. I needed help. So I actually went to the Slack AMP channel and asked if anyone else is having that problem. I got told, put up a GitHub issue. That seems like a bug. And so I did. I put one up and I got, straight away I got feedback. I got, and I got told, actually, this is a duplicate issue. Somebody's already had this. I had started trying to, I had put my GitHub issue in November, and this was dated back to July, so it was 5 months beforehand. So I was like, oh, okay. So what I did was, I sent a whole bunch of comments and questions and asking. But I was nice about it, but I put that pressure on. And what I realized was other people, when I started doing that to that old GitHub issue, more people started popping up. They started being like, I want this too. We're actually thinking about doing AMP, but we would like the lightbox to scroll. And so with all of us together, we actually got, AMP prioritized this. They actually changed, their mind about what the lightbox should be, what the functionality for this should be. And so we actually got an attribute, Scrollable, which was fantastic. The only problem for me was that it came out during the code, just before the code freeze, so I actually had to wait a couple of weeks, which, Anyway, so now in the documentation, you'll be able to see under attribute Scrollable. So with the help of, so this is a case where the AMP team, are looking for feedback. They're looking for ways to, what's a priority? What are people looking for in the community? And that would scroll if it worked right now. But I want to, so now I want to go back to those key points that I'm trying to make, and what we, and kind of talk about what us at Eventbrite learned as a whole. So the first is that, the love of the customer. We went down this endeavor of AMP not because it was this cool new thing, but because we had a problem to solve. We needed to find a way for, our pages were pretty performant, but we're always looking for more to do. And I wanted to prove that we didn't need so much JavaScript. We didn't, we should be optimizing our CSS per page. And so, AMP seemed to fit that toolbox. That was the tools that I needed. So, always follow what what your customers want. Always look for the to enhance the user experience. And then I want to talk a bit about the AMP community. That us as developers and product managers and designers and whatever else. We, AMP can't do this alone. We have a responsibility to tell the AMP team, what do we need? Even if you can't contribute, that doesn't mean you don't have a voice. You should get on that AMP Slack channel and you should open up a GitHub issue. I mean, I've opened up a bunch of them and most of them have been closed as duplicates, but at least my voice is heard there and at least they know that somebody else wants something. I can't stress enough how our participation, the community's participation will make AMP work. Right? You may sit here and think, okay, AMP's not what I want it to be, but the only way it is, the only way that the team's going to know to push it in one direction is if we all tell them, we all talk about it. The panel we just had up here was fantastic. I bet you the AMP team are going to go back with a whole lot of things to discuss and features that they should implement. So next I want to talk about iframe. I know that people are like, oof, iframe, geez. But sometimes you need it, and Sebastian said it's the duct tape, for AMP, but that's not a bad thing. For us, we wanted to iterate quickly. We didn't want to sit around for a lot of things and wait. So we used iframe until that, a component became available for us or until we had another way around it. A good example of this is our organizer contact frame. I was like, great, there's a form, I can use that. But then I realized that there's no recapture, and that was very important to us to stop, bots. So, I put up a GitHub issue, and it's coming, which is fantastic. But for the meantime, we're doing that whole loading a light. You press the contact organizer, loads the lightbox, loads the iframe, and we have, I have an endpoint for that contact form. Not the best solution, but it works. The other alternative was to hold off the project until we got the recapture form, or not include that, which was not, which a product would not let me do. And last of all, I want to see this more. I want to see accelerated mobile pages, enhanced design and user experience. Everyone talks about the speed, and everybody knows that. Fantastic. But I really feel like the CSS limit doesn't limit us. It actually forces us to take on best practices for CSS as well. It forces us to think, what's important? What's most important on this page, you know? And it helps us enhance the user experience. I think, you know, I honestly feel that like that it's not a speed or design and user experience, it's an and right there. We can, you know, like these don't have to be sacrificed. You can create beautiful pages with AMP. You know, I think we've seen that today. And I want to get people away from you know, like thinking that AMP is just for static sites and for just using the styling that comes with the components. You can really tweak those components. You know, you can take a hold of them and really do a lot. So yeah, I just, you know, I really feel that AMP has a lot of potential. It's got a lot of way to come, but it's going to be the community that helps it along too. So get out there, get in the Slack channel, put up those GitHub issues, be part of it. Thank you.